What do you make of conspiracy theories under this framework of the latter?
So here's the thing about conspiracy theories is that once in a while they're true, right? Because sometimes there's an actual conspiracy. Actually, humans are pretty good at real conspiracies, secret things. And then, I just watched the Madoff doc. Great new Netflix doc, by the way. So the question is, how do you create a system that is good at, you put the conspiracy theory in and it either goes or it says, this is interesting, let's keep exploring it. Like, how do you do something that it can, how do you assess? And so again, I think the high rung culture is really good at it, because a real conspiracy, what's going to happen is you put it, it's like a little machine you put in the middle of the table, and everyone starts firing darts at it, or bow and arrow or whatever, and everyone starts kicking it and trying to, and almost all conspiracy theories, they quickly crumble, right? Because they actually, Trump's election one is, I actually dug in and I looked at like every claim that he or his team made, and I was like, all of these, none of these hold up to scrutiny. None of them. And I was open-minded, but none of them did. So that was one that as soon as it's open to scrutiny, it crumbles. The only way that conspiracy can stick around in a community is if it is a culture where that's being treated as a sacred idea that no one should kick or throw a dart at, because if you throw a dart, it's going to break. So what you want is a culture where no idea is sacred. Anything can get thrown at. And so I think that then what you'll find is that 94 out of 100 conspiracy theories come in and they fall down. The other, maybe 4 of the others come in and there's something there, but it's not as extreme as people say. And then maybe one is a huge deal and it's actually a real conspiracy.
Well, isn't there a lot of gray area and there's a lot of mystery? Isn't that where the conspiracy theories seep in? So it's great to hear that you've really looked into the Trump election fraud claims. But aren't they resting on a lot of kind of gray area, like fog, basically saying that there is dark forces in the shadows that are actually controlling everything? I mean, the same thing with there's like safer conspiracy theories, less controversial ones, like have we landed on the moon, right? Did the United States ever land on the moon? There's, like the reason those conspiracy theories work is you could construct, there's incentives and motivation for faking the moon landing. There's a lot of there's very little data supporting the moon landing, like that's very public and kind of looks fake. Space kind of
that
looks
would be
fake.
A big story if it turned out to be fake.
That would be the argument against it. Like, are people really as a collective going to hold on to a story that big? So that. But there's a lot that the reason they work is there's mystery.
Yeah, there's a great documentary called Behind the Curve about flat earthers. And one of the things that you learn about flat earthers is they believe all the conspiracies, not just the flat earth. They're convinced the moon landing is fake. They're convinced 9/11 was an American con job. They're convinced, that name a conspiracy and they believe it. And so it's so interesting is that I think of it as a skepticism spectrum.
Yeah.
So on one side, it's like a filter in your head, a filter in the beliefs section of your brain. On one end of the spectrum, you are gullible, perfectly gullible. You believe anything someone says, right? On the other side, you're paranoid. You think everyone's lying to you, right? Everything is false. Nothing that anyone says is true, right? So obviously, those aren't good places to be. Now, the healthy place, I think So I think the healthy place is to be somewhere in the middle, but also you can learn to trust certain sources, and then you don't have to apply as much skepticism to them. And so here's what, when you start having a bias, just say you have a political bias, when your side says something, you will find yourself moving towards the gullible side of the spectrum. You read an article written that supports your views, you move to the gullible side of the spectrum, and you just believe it, and you don't have where's that skepticism that you normally have, right? Mm-hmm. And then you move, and then soon as it's the other person talking, the other team talking, you move to the skeptical, the closer to the in denial, paranoid side. Now, flat earthers are the extreme. They are either at 10 or 1. So it's so interesting because they're the people who are saying, nah, I won't believe you. I'm not gullible. No, everyone else is gullible about the moon landing. I won't. And then yet when there's this evidence like, because you can't see Seattle, you can't see the buildings over that horizon, and you should, which isn't true. Mm-hmm. You should be, if the earth were round, you wouldn't be able to see them. Therefore, so suddenly they become the most gullible person. They hear any theory about the earth flat, they believe it. It goes right into their beliefs. So they're actually jumping back and forth between refusal to believe anything and believe anything. And so they're the extreme example. But I think when it comes to conspiracy theories, the people that get themselves into trouble are the ones who they become really gullible when they hear a conspiracy theory that kind of fits with their worldview. And they likewise, when there's something that's kind of obviously true and it's not a big lie, they will actually they'll think it is. They just tighten up their kind of skepticism filter. And so yeah. So I think the healthy places to be is where you are not, because you also don't want to be the person who says every conspiracy. You hear the word conspiracy theory, and it sounds like a synonym for like quack job crazy theory, right? So yeah. So I think it's to be somewhere in the middle of that spectrum and to learn to fine tune it,
which is a tricky place to operate, because you kind of have to, every time you hear a new conspiracy theory, you should approach it with an open mind, and and also, if you don't have enough time to investigate it, which most people don't, kind of still have a humility not to make a conclusive statement that that's nonsense.
There's a lot of social pressure, actually, to immediately laugh off any conspiracy theory if it's done by the bad guys, right? You will quickly get mocked and laughed at and not taken seriously if you give any credence. Back the lab leak was a good one, where it's like, turned out that was at least very credible, if not true. And that was a perfect example of one where when it first came out, not only so Brett Weinstein talked about it. And then I, in a totally different conversation, said something complimentary about him on a totally different subject. And people were saying, Tim, you might have gone a little off the deep end. You're like quoting someone who is like a lab leak person. So I was getting my reputation dinged for complimenting on a different topic someone whose reputation was totally sullied because they had, they questioned an orthodoxy, right? So you see, so what does that make me want to do? Distance myself from Brett Weinstein. At least that's the incentive. And what does that make other people want to do? Don't become the next Brett Weinstein. Don't say it out loud, because you don't want to become someone that no one wants to compliment anymore, right? You can see the social pressure, and of course, when there is a conspiracy, that social pressure is its best friend.